All right. So the first modality that I will go over is cognitive behavioral therapy, or coined as CBT. And this is good with basically all disorders and issues, with the caveat as long as, so I'll put it, as long as the person has the ability to make cognitive connections, so i.e. does not have an intellectual disability and or a struggle with cognition, such as like a brain injury or something like that. But even then, you can still use that modality with them. So like CBT is like standard and what a lot of people like to see in treatment. So, and I'm kind of wrestling with this Zoom chat, so I'll just close it out. So what does it contain, or what does it actually do? So this has like an emphasis on changing a person's thoughts and or behaviors to influence change. So the big component here, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and how they interact with each other, is like the big thing. There's a triangle involved and everything, so I can explain that as well. So during the therapeutic work with the client, whoops, too many. Okay. Can you guys all hear me? Like some people are saying they can't hear me. If you can hear me, type yes in the chat. Yes. Okay. And if you can't hear me, I guess just make sure that your mic, and if you're on mobile, to make sure that you're using the app. All right. All right. So during therapeutic work with it, all right, work with a client, you will explore maladaptive or negative thought patterns to help influence a different outcome. Can you guys is it can you guys hear me well? Some people say they can't hear me. Yes, much better. Okay. Sorry. All right, I can. All right. So get it back all together. All right. So during the therapeutic work with a client, you explore maladaptive or negative thought patterns to help influence a different outcome. So with that, you're going to be looking at someone's going to have some negative things that they're thinking about themselves or their situation, and it's going to perpetuate and influence their behaviors, which inherently influences their feelings. So the two things that we can influence in the trio is the thoughts and the behaviors. And if you're having struggles hearing me, because a couple people say they are, I would say leave the group and come back, or download the app if you're on an application or a mobile. And if you can't see what I'm typing on, I would say it's about the same issue. So leave the group, come back, and then, but I will be here recording this, guys. So for the quality of the recording, if you guys are having issues, it'll be available to you guys after. So yes. So now that is affecting the negative thought patterns. So we're also going to explore self-destructive and or maladaptive behaviors that can be detrimental to someone's life. And then the caveat, this is often a response to someone's negative feelings or thoughts that they are experiencing, which calmly boiled down is it is their way of coping with this situation. So if, as you can imagine, this is going to be people that have like depressive disorders, anxiety, if there's some substance use in there. So that's why this modality is so effective with people. You can even use it with friends, like, hey, so what is going on with you? Like what's happening, and go with that of that. So CBT, we attempt to influence someone's situation by helping them change their thought patterns to influence their behavior. Or option 2, we attempt to change someone's reaction to a stressful situation to influence their thoughts in the future. So an example of that would be Phil is preparing to take the ASWB clinical exam, and he feels like he is going to fail since he is stupid. So with this, how CBT would work, how would we apply it? We could work on figuring out why he feels like he is stupid and have him implement positive self-talk and or confidence building techniques to influence his thought patterns. Or that is the thought side of it. The behavior side of it, we have Phil complete multiple tests that he feels like he cannot pass to prove to himself that he is smarter than he believes. So that's like the two-edged sword there within that. And the next one that I'm going to go over is number 2, behavioral modification. So this is very, very similar to cognitive behavioral, but we don't really hit on the cognitive at all. This is all behavioral type stuff. And this involves like positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. So this is most effective with children who have behavioral issues at home / school, or with people who have depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. However, as you get into the older populations, it's more difficult to have like incentives and stuff like that. It's more or less you would be using CBT, but it does not make it impossible. It does not make it impossible by any means. However, the emphasis here is all on behavior. Emphasis is entirely on the client's identified behaviors / actions they would like to change. If someone's presenting with something with you and they want to change it, behavioral mod could be the best way to do it. And it's often coupled with like conditioning style stuff. So this is where change is going to be placed on the reaction, be based on the reaction of, it's based on the reaction to reinforcements and or punishments. And I'll explain exactly what both of those mean after I explain like the nuts and bolts of it and the motivation of the person involved with the change heavily impacts the success of treatment. And I guess in the chat you can type yes or no if you want me to go over what the reinforcements are, like positive, negative reinforcement, and positive and negative punishment. Okay, it looks like everyone is saying yes. So, okay, like I said, this is your guys' group, so I have stuff planned. I'll give examples of each of them too. Don't worry. Is this part of the client intervention? Yes. So like the reinforcements are part of like the behavioral modification. So I kind of strategically swung it into this because I know some of the people that are here have posted about it. So I want to make sure that that's like a nugget. So it's like an incentive for you guys to join and be a part of the groups, is like whatever you guys want me to talk about, I totally will. And that's why my purpose is to make sure that you guys feel prepared. So we'll start off with positive reinforcement. And what exactly does this look like? And this is any favorable or desirable stimuli, well, fancy word for basically influence that when presented after a behavior increases the likelihood of it occurring again. And I'll give a couple examples, and if you guys want more, feel free. Can you give examples of classical versus operant? Okay, so Lena, I can't get that far off topic. Like classical, conditioned, and operant are like totally different like modalities. So if you're curious about those You can just stay after the group and I can answer those questions as well. Yes, so an example of positive is getting positive praise for a joke you told to your friends. And another one, getting money for completing chores. Like, if you can imagine, people don't entirely like doing their chores sometimes. So if someone gives you a reward, you're more apt to do it. You're like, yes, please give me that nice bit of money, or let me have my friend over. So like, it's adding something positive into the situation. And another one for people that work out is like the good feeling you get after working out. Because some people are like, man, working out sucks, but for some people it's like a positive reinforcement to keep going. Like, if you notice that you feel better after working out, or you are losing weight and that's your intended goal, that is a positive reinforcement to continue doing it. However, if you were going to the gym and you were gaining weight, like excessive amounts of weight, like you go to the gym 7 days a week and you gain 50 pounds of fat, you probably wouldn't want to go back. You'd be like, I'm not going back there. Like, that was not my intended result. So I'm not going to continue doing that. So that's positive reinforcement. And then negative reinforcement is the removal of an unfavorable or undesirable stimuli / influence after a behavior was completed with the intended goal of increasing the likelihood of it happening again. And I will get this down so it's all on the same page. So examples here. No, I don't want that. There we go. So an example here would be putting your seat buckle on and it stops the beeping sound in your car. Because you imagine, like, before they put that beeping thing, people that had zero incentive of wanting to put in their seat buckle on, besides wanting to save their own life. But imagine people, when left to their own device, are going to do what they want. So another example is if you have to pay money every time that you fail to do an action, it is going to increase the likelihood of avoiding that behavior. So like, that's another influence that people don't like to do is like money. So a third example to make it is if every time you went over to a friend's house, they made fun of you, you would stop going to prevent from being made fun of. Like, the undesirable thing there is you would gain sanity by not going. So the negative reinforcement is, I'm not going to go so I don't get made fun of. So removing that sense of being made fun of when you go to their house. So you're like, I'm just not going to go. I don't like being made fun of. So To reiterate, the positive reinforcement is you bringing something that's desirable into the situation for making it. And then the negative reinforcement is taking away in something that you don't like. So that is where it makes it easier. And then that is where we have positive punishment. And then I'll put negative punishment as well, so that way I don't have to redo it. So positive punishment here is any unfavorable event or outcome in order to weaken the response / action it follows. So something you do not like happens, so it decreases the likelihood of you repeating that action. So, whoops. So an example here, receiving ridicule for a joke you told. So with that, you would not tell the joke again to avoid being ridiculed. And another example is like spanking a child for misbehaving. The spanking would decrease the likelihood of them misbehaving again. I thought any yes. And then the negative punishment is when a favorable event or outcome is removed after a behavior and or action occurs. Whoops. And then here, put that in. So an example, taking a child's video game after they misbehave. Another, driving privileges are revoked when you have repeated speeding offenses. And then loss of paycheck if you violate work rules. So to recap it real fast, positive reinforcement provides something in the situation to make you want to do it again. Negative reinforcement removes something from a situation to make you want to do the behavior more. Like, just so you can have the beeping stopped, you'd put on your seatbelt. Just to have your money from not being taken, you're going to do the behavior. So you like your money, them removing your money is going to make you want to do the action even more. So you do the action to prevent your money from being taken. And then positive punishment is when an unfavorable action happens after to reduce the likelihood from it happening. And then negative punishment is when a favorable event is taken away from someone due to them doing a behavior, so it decreases the likelihood of them wanting to do it again. So for example, if I had my video game taken away, if I misbehaved, the chances of me misbehaving in the future is probably going to be less. And then if my license gets taken away because I've been speeding, it's going to make me more cautious and not want to speed in the future. So does that make sense for positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment? And type yes in the chat if it makes sense. Okay. So yeah, that's behavior modification of you utilizing, manipulating these different aspects when in the situation. So then the next modality we'll look at is dialectical behavioral. Yes, so all the reinforcements increase the likelihood of the behavior, and then all the punishments decrease the likelihood of the behavior. And that leads us into, whoops. Okay. Which leads us into the third modality, dialectical behavior therapy, or shortened for DBT. And this is most of, okay, who's annotating? Stop it. Cut it out. Cut it out. Okay. So this is most effective with people who have borderline personality disorder and or substance use disorder. So this has a huge emphasis on any maladaptive type behaviors or self-like induced harm type things. So if there's anything like that, DBT is probably going to be your go-to, and this is often broke into 4 different treatment categories, which is the first one being mindfulness. And the purpose here is it helps the client to be more focused on the present moment, which allows the client to begin, all words, to begin letting go of the past and their expectations of the future. Which the huge thing here is like cognitive, well, goal is to overcome cognitive dysregulation. Thoughts negatively impacting one's life. So then, which leads us into the second one, emotion regulation, which within that helps a client to better understand their emotions and where/why they occur. So a lot of people with like borderline and or substance use, they may not entirely know why they're reacting to certain types of things, or which type of behaviors like increase their likelihood of the behaviors that they're exhibiting and or coping with. So within this unit, it's just to help them get a sense. Like if you've had people that have borderline, they ultimately are just honed in on everyone else's emotional situations and what they can do to better help them. So it's a matter of allowing them to become their own identity. So this allows someone to have better control of their emotions and to influence / change any unwanted emotions to help reduce amplified expression. So if you're thinking entirely on the emotion sense of your mind, you're going to be a little more sensitive and a little more hyped up when responding to certain situations. So the emotion regulation has the entire goal of one, to mitigate. So I'll put that here. Mitigate impulsive decision making. So if someone's thinking entirely out of their emotional mind, they're going to be a little more impulsive than they would have been otherwise. And with that, we have the next one, which is distress tolerance. And this involves helping the client, helps clients to get through stressful situations / events without making the situation worse by their reaction. So, i.e., someone hears about a death in their family, they are not sure how to cope, so they attempt suicide. So like, and I'm sure you guys have worked with a couple of clients, they didn't really know how to express their feelings in a situation, and they did try to complete suicide, or they overdosed, or they started using substances out of nowhere, or broke in, or started doing behaviors that they otherwise would not have done. And yeah, so the main goal is to eliminate or reduce the likelihood for impulsive decision making and to increase the client's ability to cope with life events. Which leads us to the fourth one, which is interpersonal effectiveness, or their ability to develop relationships with someone. So interpersonal effectiveness involves allowing clients to form healthy relationships with other people. And then I'm going to put a huge emphasis on healthy. So not just any type of relationships that come about, but only healthy ones, because most people that have these types of disorders may be clinging to situations that the relationships are only based on purpose or survival type things. So they begin to form meaningful mutual connection with other people, with an emphasis on they learn how to set boundaries and express their needs, which are often heard and met by the other person in the relationship. So it allows people to actually start getting into being respected. And a driving force with, excuse me, beyond the work of dialectical behavioral, the examination of one's mind and how they react and handle situations, which involves a couple pieces. So logic mind, emotion mind, and then the third piece of it is the wise mind. So within these each little pieces, if you can imagine, the word that comes before it is what each of them are. So logical mind, excuse me, uses logic and past experience to guide their decision making process. So they're very logical. Any information, any evidence, they tend to base all of their decision making on that. And of course, it's hard to generalize and speak in such extreme, but there are people that only are logic mind people, and then we have people that are only emotion side. So this is someone that uses emotions, feelings, and psychological needs to guide their decision making process. So this is somebody that, regardless of what the evidence is telling them, they're like, well, I feel like I need to be doing this. Okay, go on, go right ahead. Or, wow, I feel like I need to do this because I'm sad. I need to go buy a new car because I'm sad. Somebody from the logic mind would say, well, how much money do you have? How are you going to do it? Like, how are you going to keep it? You have to keep in mind the insurance rates. Someone on the motion side is like, I'm just going to do it regardless of what the situation looks like. It'll make me feel better, and I need to feel better now. Okay, go right ahead. So then the wise mind is like the middle ground that attempts to find balance between the logical mind and the emotional mind. So this looks like someone who lives within the moment and is aware of different factors in their life, but makes decisions based on the present moment only. Sounds like the id, ego, and super ego. Yes, it kind of does. However, the difference between it is one's not going for good, one's not going for bad. But yeah, there is that kind of balance in between the two. And I'm sure you've experienced all three in your days. Like, you'll have somebody that says like, hey, I think I'm going to go and do this behavior. The other person's like, you totally can't. You have your ASWB exam tomorrow. Screw it. This will make me feel good for the exam. The logic person's like, well, this is how long it takes. This is how much sleep I need. This is how far the drive is. This is how much traffic there's probably going to be. The emotion mind is like, bingo, I'll do whatever makes me feel good and confident and comfortable that day. And then the person that's wise is like, I can do this amount of behavior. I still have to make sure I accommodate all these other factors. However, the most important thing to me right now is this present moment, rather than the past influences, the future influences, to get it done. So that is CBT behavioral modification, and DBT. Does anyone have any questions so far before I get into solution focused, task centered, and then get into the family therapies? And if you don't have any questions, just type no in the chat. But if you have questions, type yes. Okay. And if you have questions, type them to the public. So like on your chat, just toggle it to everyone rather than just privately. So that way everyone can see the question. So the few people that said they had a question, feel free to drop a shout, and I'll see what we need to answer. What disorder is for the one, wait a second. What disorder is for the one in between CBT and DBT? Oh, behavioral modification. So the disorders here is typically children who have like behavioral issues at home and school, or people who have like depression, anxiety, and or substance use. However, when you get into the older type populations, it's harder for people to make that connection because you need to more or less get the cognitions involved rather than just behavioral changes to make it happen. What are the expectations for questions on this topic? So the expectation is just having the backing of knowing what each of them looks like. So that way, if you do have a question that presents with like borderline type symptoms, and they ask you what would be the best treatment for this person, or what are key details that you should take note of this, or if you're working with a family that's presenting with enmeshed boundaries, you would know like, oh, hey, I should probably use structural family therapy rather than a Bowen's. Like the exam is tricky, so I can't really guarantee what types of questions you'll see. I just provide information based on what the overall thing is. And then the questions at the end that I provide, like if you've been in a group before, they try to hone in on like comprehension as well as like the application of the information within a clinical perspective. And if you have any particular questions you'd like to see, I can create one to accommodate whatever you'd like to see. Like those that have been in a group before, they've seen it, seen me just whip up random questions, which takes me a little bit of time, but we get it. Because like I said, my ultimate goal is to make sure that you guys feel confident and comfortable around this content if you do see it on the exam. Please create a question for an example. Say a little bit more about that, Julius, but I'm going to continue on. So ask earlier, but no response. Will there be next and most and best questions? Yes. So all the questions I provide at the end are involved in that category. Can you give an example of a most or best with these? Yes. So hold your horses on the practice question, guys. We'll get to those. So solution-focused therapy. So an emphasis is going to be placed on solution. So we're entirely going to be hunting and clawing for some type of solution. So because most people get solution-focused and task-centered confused. So emphasis is on solution and not just any solution, on a quick solution. So like if you hear solution focused, be like, boom, I need to come up with a solution quick. So this is a brief modality. Okay. So this is a brief modality. Brief modality that is goal driven and focused on solving the presenting problem as quickly and with as little involvement as possible. And with that, it often involves the miracle question. Yeah, whoever's seen that annotation too, I have no idea who's doing that. He kind of spooks me out though. So the miracle question, we have all heard the miracle question. So that is basically like an example is that of that is if anything could happen to you, what change would you like to see? So the miracle question. So let's say we have an example of this. Whoops, that is not what I meant to do. So an example, Phil wants to pass his ASWB clinical exam on the first try. So solution focus based on this, therapists would attempt to identify resources, skills, and strengths within his situation to make the highest likelihood of passing the first time happen. So the miracle question, Phil, what would you like to see in your life? I want to pass my ASWB clinical exam on the first try. So a therapist Phil would say, all right, let's see what resources we have. Let's see what we can get to you. Let's see what you currently have within you. So with that, we would always have an emphasis on therapist and client, focus on the present situation and change that can happen now / as quickly as possible. So an example of this might be, oh, let's see what we can find for free for you. Let's go to YouTube. See if there's any videos or strategies. Oh, there's this guy named Phil that makes videos. How about you watch this and see if this works for you? Boom. It might be an immediate solution to change someone's view and or confidence around, or could do the total opposite, tank you and make you feel more anxious. But this is what a therapist would do. So the emphasis is on the client's strengths and resources already present or easily accessible to them. We're not trying to make long-term change here. It's like immediate, like pow. So this is utilized to stabilize / promote quick quality of life improvements. So that is what solution is. We're literally hunting for a solution, wanting to get it as immediate as possible, and to try to expound as little energy as possible. Not to say that the clinician's being lazy. They just want the person to be able to sustain the change within their own environment without the clinician actually happen to be there and refresh all of the time. So that's why I had an emphasis on the videos on YouTube, because in this study recording, like, you guys are going to have access to this for as long as that you need it. And of course, I'm going to be around in case you guys need additional clarification or questions or stuff like that, but it's kind of hands off at that point. So the next modality is task centered, and the emphasis is on task. So a task is a specific mission, involves completing a mission which has steps. So that just kind of came to me as well to like differentiate it. So solution focus, you're coming for a specific solution. Task, you're trying to complete a more long-term type situation. So this is a collaborative relationship between the therapist and client. Specific task, well, specific task/task, if there's multiple, is/are identified by the client, and a plan is established to make the intended, well, identified or intended change happen. So solution is brought about by considering barriers, resources that they have / need. So in the solution focus, they already had everything. Task focus, we may need to gather in the motivation of the client. So we're mobilizing and getting them ready to make the change, and then the work is completed by the client outside of the therapeutic setting. So like we mobilize and get them ready, but ultimately whatever happens. We don't have extensive like hands-on type thing. And then this is often done by a case management type social worker. So picture a client coming to a case manager when they need, oops, there's an A there, when they need something but do not have that regular of contact or follow-up. Or they might, depending on the type of setting. But for the simplicity of this, it's more of a case management. So to boil it down, you supply resources, ideas, and avenues of change, and the client decides what they want to do with the information / resources to achieve their overall task / goal. So those are the two last ones that involved only the specific person. Did it make sense, the differentiation between solution and task-centered? Or do you guys want me to provide a task-centered example? I just realized I didn't. And if you want an example, just type example rather than yes. So that way I don't I don't really just burn on without it. Example, thank you. Yes, example, please. Okay. Yeah, you guys are welcome. This makes my Sundays thoroughly enjoyable. Okay. So an example here, Phil wants to do you guys want to keep exam examples, or do you want like a real life example? So I guess type exam or real life in the chat, because I just keep emphasizing exam because it's real life exam, real life exam, real life. Okay, so we're kind of torn. Whatever helps in the exam. Okay, so Phil recently lost his apartment, so he is homeless and comes to a social worker for assistance. Phil's overall goal is to find housing and to improve his overall life. The social worker provides a list of housing resources, homeless shelters, and transportation to get to the housing offices. So that's more of an example of like task centered. Phil comes in, has a problem, needs help, is given resources to make it happen rather than in a solution focus. We'd emphasize on what he currently has in his life. So that is an example of task centered. Okay, and now I'm going to take the last like hour of time to tackle family, because people have been saying they've seen a lot of family on the exams that they've taken, as well as a couple of people like wanted me to specifically talk about it. So I wanted to dedicate a bit of time on it, since there are 3 different types that have different workings about them. So I'll start off with Bowen, and then let me family therapies. Oh, well, that's convenient. Okay, so family therapy. So the first one, we're going to look at Bowen's family therapy. So within Bowen's, he believed that the family system is a living organism and such has identifiable patterns of behavior. And within this, in the family organism or structure, patterns of dysfunction can, well, dysfunctional. Okay. Patterns of dysfunctional behavior tend to be repeated into and stabilized over time and undermine family relationships. Oops. So a huge emphasis is placed on intergenerational patterns of behavior. So how is what is going on in the family now going to impact future generations, and how is the behaviors from the past influencing current patterns of behavior? So there's 8 different concepts. So 8 different concepts of family systems here, or Bowen's. So kind of often gets tossed around on both of them. So differentiation of self, and this is the manner in which a person is able to separate themselves from their family members, such as thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and their and their response to stressful situations, with another thing of how is the person able to separate their goals from the overall functioning of the family. So with that, there's different categories with it. So we have highly differentiated and poorly differentiated. And with a highly, this is where someone is able to maintain individuality while still maintaining emotional contact with their family, i.e., react to the world rationally and enter into relationships while balancing competing needs for both belonging and being an individual. So in the less technical terms, is someone able to be their own person while being there for the people that they care about? So an example here, whoops, crank that in. Oh, come on. So an example, someone is off to college to become a social worker and is able to focus on graduating while still being able to communicate with their family. However, they are able to allow their situation to happen and the struggles of their family to not be their entire responsibility. So oftentimes you'll see people that go off to like colleges and stuff, and then when any negative things happen with their family or anything, they want to go back and want to rescue everyone. And that would be poorly differentiated. Highly differentiated would be able to say, well, I can understand your situation, it's not where you'd like to be, however, I need to make sure that I'm safe before I am able to help everyone else. So this is so poorly differentiated. Someone struggles with being able to think clearly for themselves and often reacts based on their emotional side, i.e., they are so involved in the situation they aren't able to view it objectively. So with that, we have a huge dependent on the approval of others in their family, and it influences their decision making. Look to others to help them solve their problems in their life because they do not rely on themselves to make decisions. So an example here, someone goes off to college and is struggling in math class and calls their friend back home to help them solve the problems they are experiencing when the friend has no knowledge in math. They just find that person comfortable. So then the second is emotional triangles. And what this is a three-way person relationship / interaction. And considered the smallest possible stable relationship system and or the smallest the smallest stable. So you can have multiple different people, and then oftentimes contains two sides that are stable and one side that is in conflict with other people. So with this, essentially when there is tension within a relationship in the family, one of the people involves another person, and it helps spread the discomfort or conflict. So during calm periods, the two insiders or people who are stable exclusively choose each other and exclude the third person or the outsider. The outsider feels rejected and tries to get close with one of the insiders, which inherently causes conflict. So during moderate periods of tension between the two insiders, one of the insiders will go to the outsider for comfort, which makes the original outsider and insider, and one of the original insiders and outsiders. So more or less, in moderate tensions, one of the people that were cool goes to the person that felt rejected, and they create a group, and then one of the people that there was no conflict with now becomes the outsider. And then at high levels of tension, the outsider becomes the most desirable because there is a need for comfort when in conflict. Thus, whoever is feeling most victimized will attempt to find validation and approval from the outsider to alleviate the pressure from the original relationship. Yes, and this is basically triangulation. So like emotional triangles or triangulation. Yes. So the process is of, we have two people, and then we have another person that's on the outside. But yes, so in triangulation, the purpose is to alleviate it. So then the third component is the family projection process. And this is basically transmission of a parent's emotional problems to one or more of the children within the emotional triangle or outsiders. So anyone that's not in the original like in group or anything along those lines is considered an outsider. Insiders, anyone. So this projection may contribute to the development of emotional disturbance or problems. So an example would look like a parent with low self-esteem and they project it onto one of their children. From there, they provide constant approval or affirmations to the child to prevent them from feeling isolated or rejected. So a parent has super anxiety and was like, I was rejected as a kid. I don't want my kids to feel rejected. So they overcompliment the kid, which can also, what often leads to them being more anxious in the future when people are not providing that constant validation or affirmation. So another example is a parent, a parent feels confident in their abilities and project it to their children. A parent allows a child to make their own decision and provides guidance as needed. The child will gain a sense of confidence just as the parent projected. Okay. And yeah, from the next one of the 8. Like I said, the family therapies is the longest one, but the other 2 family therapies are not as in depth. So the 4th one is multi-generational. Transmission process. So this involves small differences in differentiation between parents and their offspring leads to, over many generations, to progress or regress on their level of interdependence on each other. So roles, patterns, emotional reactivity, and family structure are a few components that can be passed from one generation to the next. So if my family only has a couple of kids, I may pass that on. I may have the less likelihood of wanting to have a lot of kids in my relationships. However, if I have come from a family that has like a lot of siblings, it can make me want to have a lot of siblings for my kids. I want to pass on the traditions for them. Or it could do the total opposite. I go away from what my parents did because I didn't like the experience that I had within that. So, so each generation each generation of children that are most fused / less differentiated will pass that on to their children. So in less super technical terms, i.e., if a child grows up in a family that is healthy, they are likely to have a healthy family environment for their children. So then the 5th component we're looking at, emotional cutoff. So emotional cutoff here is where a person decides to best manage their emotional difficulties or other family concerns by emotionally distancing themselves from other members of the family, or they project them onto other family members and look for them to solve their issues. So there's two different degrees. So an example of an emotional cutoff is a person moves away from home or keeps physical contact but avoids emotional topics. So within this, a person may look to form new relationships outside of the family and place more importance on those relationships due to feeling disconnected from the members of their family. So a person may seek out relationships that can help meet needs that are not being filled within their family system. So patterns, they try to emerge, continue to show up within their future relationships. So the emotional cutoff is you cut off yourself from your family and try to get the needs met in other areas, or the opposite. The family tries to take over everyone's needs, which is still maladaptive, but typically we often see that someone distances themselves due to the fact of they don't feel connected or they don't feel comfortable. So the sixth component is the sibling position. And within this describes the tendency of the oldest, middle, and youngest children to assume specific prescribed roles. And not every family is going to have all of these roles, so you can kind of like mix them up within it if the person doesn't have all of it. However, the oldest child typically tends to have leadership type roles. And then the middle child looks to take on roles of both the middle, or both the older and younger child. So what does that look like? They can be a leader and follower depending on the situation. on the setting or situation. And then the young child, or the youngest child, correct that to the youngest child, often prefers to be a follower within situations/interactions they are involved with. So a big impact is differentiation can impact this heavily. So an older child who was anxiously focused on may grow up indecisive and highly reactive to expectations being placed on them, which would make them more of a follower. So, and then the opposite. In a situation where the youngest child fills in the roles, older child, they may be more differentiated and thus occupy leadership roles with confidence. And then the seventh characteristic, the nuclear family emotional process. So what does this mean? So this describes the four basic family relationship patterns that govern where problems develop in a family. So a person's attitude and belief system may impact the development of issues in a family, but the main contributing factor is the emotional family system. So it doesn't really matter how differentiated or advanced someone is. The emotional state of one's family, they own it regardless of where they're currently at themselves. So the different processes involve marital / intimate partner conflicts. So when a family is in conflict, and the anxieties and emotions of both parental figures increases, and they project them onto other family members. So they may begin to lash out about the other person's shortcomings. They will both seek to have a sense of control in the relationship, which the impact is on the children. So an example here, a child is underperforming in school and both parents are upset. However, rather than focusing on the situation, both parents blame the other for the downfall, rather than trying to help the child, which the maladaptive center here is like nothing's being solved since the kid still needs help. So the second here is dysfunction within a relationship by one of the spouses. And what does this look like? One partner pressures the other to think and act in a certain way, and the other attempts to fulfill that role. So both partners do what is expected to keep harmony in the relationship. This can lead to children playing this out into future relationships, i.e., needing to complete specific tasks to remain in a relationship. And the eighth and final characteristic is societal emotional process. So what does this involve? This involves examining how the principle affecting the family system applies to the emotional system of society, which basically is saying, are the current behaviors, ideologies, and traditions within a family helping them to progress or regress from generation to generation. So regression would look like society acts to alleviate anxiety / tension in the moment with little thought of long-term consequences. So, and less technical, there is low level of differentiation depending on others to strive, well, to survive and thrive. And the other progression emphasis is placed on making informed decisions with the future in mind. So this is high level of differentiation. Family depends on their own resources and is able to survive without much societal influence. So they're able to do things on their own and advance themselves. So that is Bowen's very bolsterous type stuff. The second type that we're looking at here is structural family therapy, which aims to alter the family's organization with a focus on thought patterns, communication, thought patterns and communication styles that negatively impact the family unit. Just realized I was not in the intended mode. So emphasis is placed on the family as a whole rather than individual members. And then examines family subsystems and the impact on the overall structure. And this is where huge emphasis is placed on boundaries and the interplay of interaction, which involves types of boundaries. So earlier in the group, somebody was like, hey, sounds like it meshed boundaries, which you were correct in some of these. So with this, the first type is enmeshed / diffuse type boundaries, and this is that they are meshed together. So what does this look like? So they fail to keep people separated enough / blurred lines, lack of boundaries or sense of self within relationships. So it's difficult for family members to establish a sense of independence, which can prevent people from creating their own sense of identity, which involves developing relationships outside of the family and regulating / having their own opinions and emotions. Because if you're enmeshed, you don't really have your own sense of what a normitude is. You base it on what everyone else does. So what it looks like is a parent can become overly involved in a child's life and use them to live out their unfulfilled dreams, like force someone into doing something that they might entirely not want to do, as well as the parent can center their actions and emotions on the child / children and use them as a emotional support. So like the dad's like, hey, I've had a rough day, and then this is everything that happened to me. It's so crappy. Or like, hey, this is what's happened with your mom or my girlfriend. When it's like, hey, you should probably not be processing with a child. Like, you're a parental figure, and you need to ensure that you're doing age appropriate type things with the child, rather than having them engage in conversations they otherwise should probably not be involved with. And then the second is disengaged or rigid. And with that, what does this look like? So boundaries are extremely rigid, or there is little room for people to be involved. So they tend to distance themselves from others in the family. So they value, emphasis is placed on autonomy and independence, which lowers the value on emotional closeness, support, and affection. Tend to be unaware of the problems occurring in the family. Find it difficult to support other members of the family due to emotional distance. And I'll go back to enmeshed and provide a couple of examples, because I just realized that I didn't. So the first example is child and parent are best friends. And then another is parent tells child that they are cheating on other parent slash vents to them. And then an example or a couple examples of disengaged slash rigid. So family lives in same house but do not know anything about each other. They stay out of each other's business and just kind of cohabitate. And another is two family members have a conflict but do not talk about it. Which leads us to the third, clear slash healthy boundaries. So what do these look like? Person attains person obtains a sense of personal autonomy slash identity, yet allows sense of belongingness within family relationships. So this person, they're out of the environment, but they come back. They're able to occupy multiple things. They let people know what's going on within their life rather than staying distant and away from it. So this is an environment where people are comfortable with sharing their feelings and thoughts without much fear of criticism. They're allowed to just be who they are and where they are. So this is effective communication and respect of personal space and information kept. And then compromise and accommodation of each other exists. And then the last family modality is strategic family therapy. And the key thing is driving factor that the therapist believes change can occur rapidly without intensive analysis of the source of the problem. So here we're looking at examining family processes and functions such as communication or problem solving, patterns by evaluating family behavior outside therapy session. So a lot of this work is done outside. Therapist just provides a little bit of insight and in resources, and the people ultimately get it done. So if you remember, like task centered, like this is like right up the alley of it, but just on a family. So the family agrees to the therapist being in charge, and they act as the expert. So basically, say as I do. So designs strategy for change. And so the therapist will employ paradoxical interventions, which basically suggesting the family take action in opposition to their treatment goals. So, i.e., wanting to increase their communication, the therapist would have them reduce their level of communication to see how well it works for them. So basically a strategy to get the family to buy in to the strategies the social worker will introduce to promote the change within the family. Basically like reverse psychology. So it helps provide a measure, well, a baseline measure and how much progress can be made with implemented strategies. And therapist will utilize circular questioning to gather information from the family. So what does that actually look like? Like, what is circular question, you wonder? Well, here we go. It's allowing everyone to share their views without other family members interrupting or influencing their response. Because the reasoning for that, everyone gets a turn to share. So the entire picture is able to be painted. So that is CBT, DBT, behavioral modification, solution focus, task centered, Bowen's, structural family therapy, and strategic family therapy. Are there any questions up to this point before I stop the recording and whip out the practice questions? I've observed that families that are enmeshed tend to have an unhealthy. What do we need to know about harm reduction? In regards to what? Alexis, like what in particular about harm reduction? The exam. Um, well, we always start with where the client is. So regardless of what our views in particular are on modalities and behaviors, we often go with what the client wants to do. So harm reduction often seen with like self-harm, substance use, etc. We'd often let them guide and see exactly what they want to do. Is this used to harm reduce? Yeah, so harm reduction is basically you're not eliminating the behavior in general, but you're just allowing the client to titrate down to a level that they're comfortable with or appropriate with. What about the psychodynamic and the psychoanalytic? What is the difference? Oh, smokes. Um, so Freudian theory, eh? So psychodynamic is the thought processes behind actual behavior, such as like catharsis or processing specific feelings. Psychoanalytic is more or less like id, superego, ego. So I've done study groups on Freud before. Two kind of similar, totally different though, because one involves like specific child development. The other is looking more about behavior in general and defense mechanisms and the interplay of the id, superego, and ego. We can use these same techniques and theories from working with couples. Yes. So a lot of these modalities that I went over today can be used in multiple settings with multiple different populations. So any other questions in particular before I turn off the recording and whip out the practice questions? Do any of these apply more for your groups? Whip the questions out. All right. Do any of these tiers apply for more for groups? So you can apply the modalities for groups. So DBT is like a individual therapy as well as groups. CBT can be done across the range of groups. Behavior modifications often not seen in group settings since it's often privy to like specific people. Like the rewards would have to be enticing to everyone in the group if you were to do that, but that's often more of like a individual type 1. The family therapies, of course, would be done within the family structures, so that wouldn't be a group one. Solution focused, you'd more or less be doing with people, and then task centered could be done, I suppose, in a group setting, but more or less on individual as well. All right. And if you don't have any, knowing 8 different concepts, now how do we actually apply them to the treatment? So the different levels of Bowens are just different considerations that you could work through and notice. So not all of the families exhibit the same components, or some of them you need to examine all of them. All right. Do we have to know the theorists for these therapies? That is sometimes not, because sometimes I say sometimes you do, because the exam is going to say like, hey, this is this person's theory, and then this is what it means. However, oftentimes the exam, if it's asking about a specific theory, will provide the person that did it as well as the name of the theory. Like the exam's not going to say, hey, what is Freud's second theory that he introduced? They would say like, according to like psychodynamic or psychoanalytic or psychosexual type deal, or like Erickson's stages or PJ or Kohlberg's and stuff like that. So, however, remember, I'm not affiliated with ASWB, so I can't specifically guarantee anything. I am just here to provide my perspective on the different theories and ways to remember them during the exam, as well as guide you guys through like practice question analysis for when it's on the exam. So if you don't have any questions, just type no in the chat so I know. But if you do, type yes. So I can see that 1, people are alive still. And 2, I can gauge. Okay. So the recording is done. Right.